And sex is even worse than kidnapping, according to the theology. Okay? It's crazy.
Trying to debunk that Mormons are violent criminals is like, I don't even know where to begin. It's so obviously false.
This girl needs to sit down.
And I think what bugs me the most about this host is she can't blame the kidnapper. She's blaming it on the religion. She's blaming it on the mom. She's blaming it on the gift of discernment. She's blaming it on everything except for the actual person that did this heinous crime.
Excellent point.
Yes.
If Mormonism is the thing that they were able to focus on to help them through these challenges, where's the balance in that if Mormonism set them up to become the prey to these predators?
The stretch that this woman is dragging us through is so incredibly painful. But Erica, thank you for bringing this to our attention, because
it seems like she didn't want to have to say it, but she had to say it.
3% of the human population is a psychopath. That makes me sick that someone would defile the name of Joseph Smith by equating him to forced kidnapped child brides. That's disgustingly wrong.
Emotionally,
no.
Like
Stop. Listen.
Got our scripture notes up and running. All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description.
Hello, welcome to Women of Word Radio. I'm Erica. We're just going to jump right in and begin our topic today, which is actually debunking how Mormonism is breeding murderers, kidnappers, criminals.
Say what?
Yes.
I'm so excited for this. This is going to be epic.
Here we go.
I'm so excited.
Hopefully.
Let's do it.
Hopefully you guys can see the connections that I saw and it all makes sense, because sometimes I feel like my mind kind of rapid fires in a million different directions. But I found this channel and I was really excited at first. It's called Mormon True Crime. And so I wanted to see what she had to say about how it all coincides. So the first video that I watched of this girl's was about a guy named Israel Keys. Have you guys ever heard about Israel Keys?
No.
Okay. So he was this guy. He grew, his mom and dad were members of the church. They left in 1978. And then he ended up being a serial killer later in life. But I was disappointed because I didn't feel like the connections that she made really made any sense to me. So then I decided to watch another video about Elizabeth Smart. Have you heard about Elizabeth Smart?
Yes.
That one I've heard of.
Okay.
Rings a bell.
Okay. So the first thing that she comes up with is about how, Elizabeth's mom and dad met this guy on the street. He was this homeless man, and her mom felt like she had the gift of discernment, which is taught in the church, and decided to invite this homeless man into her home to do work. Okay, so there's a video clip at 55 seconds.
Really challenged me as an ex-Mormon in the fact that I recently did the Jan Broberg case, and both this story and Jan Broberg's case, they really talked about how the church was something that it gave them something to focus on, to ground on, to really help them through something that was really, really terrible that happened to them for an extended period of time. And so while I am an ex-Mormon who believes that the Mormon beliefs and theology is verifiably false, it made it really difficult because I believe in believing victims. And when victims say that the church helped them through something that's very, very traumatic, it made me sit there oh, where is the nuance on this? Where is the line? Where is, how do I make these conflicting views jive?
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Because I know what I felt like.
So let me just recap a little bit here. So essentially, she's started a channel called Mormon True Crime, which true crime is like an entertainment, escapism, like kind of thing that people watch, right, or listen to, right? It can be really entertaining. It's these wild stories of crimes, and they're all their details, all their nitty-gritty details. But she's making the case that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is actually pumping out this type of character. Am I right there?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's weird.
That's a pretty wild claim.
Yeah.
So I was pretty shocked at like the clip that we just watched. I was like a little bit speechless to be like, wait a second, this girl just went through this incredibly traumatic experience and you're having a problem with how she got through it. Even like because that you disagree with the church, you are upset with how she was able to like come out of this alive.
It just shows that some people will never be happy with the church no matter what they do. Like the church can't win in some people's eyes. So for Elizabeth Smart to credit the church for helping her through that very traumatic experience, there's a person saying, no, actually, no, that's not what happened. And they should be blamed. And they did not help you. So in reality, she's actually coming after a victim and saying, no. Like, I have a hard time with people like this. I'm sorry, I don't even know her name, but the host of this channel, like I said, if the church can never win in her eyes, so of course she's going to make false connections anywhere she can to try and rationalize her way of thinking, because obviously she's right and the rest of us are just stupid and wrong.
Yeah.
She's a hammer looking for a nail.
So, sorry, I went backtrack a little bit, but she's blaming the church for the gift of discernment, and she's basically like, oh, her mom felt like God was telling her to invite this guy into her house. And she also talks about how Mormonism sets people up to be prey, like because our culture can be very like giving and trying to help people out. She was like, well, you set yourself up. Like,
sorry, you're too good of a person. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's
So wait a minute. So she's accusing us of two things, right? One,
so far,
that our theology causes us to be like crazy, violent criminals, but also it produces societies so safe and so protected and so peaceful that we're really trusting and open and vulnerable to this kind of crime. Like, you can't have it both ways.
We're all bipolar, crazy nut jobs, apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, like, we don't, like, our church does not, it's not like us as members of the church have the gift of discernment and no one else. It's almost like she's blaming that of, well, this religion told you had the gift of discernment. And it's like, no, everyone on earth for a human has an intuition, right? Has that light of Christ. So just because we talk about the gift of discernment doesn't mean that it's just something that's specific to us. Everyone can have that. And just because, you know, like it's
the stretch that this woman is dragging us through is so incredibly painful. But Erica, thank you for bringing this to our attention, because I swear or promise, this is Word Radio, I promise, I was unaware of this corner of the internet where people just come for us. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm not here to say that every member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that everybody is perfect. I'm not saying that. Jesus Christ is perfect. Our Heavenly Father is perfect. We here on earth are not. I'm getting distracted. But we're really good people who are striving to be like our Heavenly Father. The gift of discernment is a gift that we are taught that we have so that we realize our divine potential. So for her to take that and stretch it and do it for views and
yeah.
Well, I'm essentially
speechless.
criticizing the mother for being kind to a homeless person. Like, that's a very Christian thing to do. It super backfired in this case, but that's just an odd claim to make. Like, ooh, you are part of a cult that produces violent murderers because you we're nice to a homeless person.
And let's make it very clear, this story was horrific that happened to this poor girl. And I believe I saw like a Lifetime movie on it. The individual, the man, the homeless man, he also believed that he was making Elizabeth another wife. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. He had some wackadoodle views of our church as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. He was insane. He believed that Elizabeth Smart was like the chosen one. And so he was like adopted as her. I don't know. It was crazy. Very, yeah.
Okay. Should we watch the clip really fast? I'm going to edit this part out. Do we want to watch the clip? Because the discernment is at 3:34.
There's two. There's one at 2:10 about how Mormonism set them up to be prey, or at 3:34 gifted discernment.
Okay, then I'm going to go back to 2:10 and then we'll watch 3:34 so the audience knows what we're referencing. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
If Mormonism is the thing that they were able to focus on to help them through these challenges, where's the balance in that if Mormonism set them up to become the prey to these predators? I don't know the answer to that right now, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So we're the predator and the prey.
Yeah, I've never felt so powerful.
So we're normal people. Is that what she's saying? We're just super normal.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. 3% of the human population is a psychopath. Like, that's not just like a fluffy thing. That's like legitimately like diagnosable psychopath. And so we're members of the church, but we're also made up of humans. And so we're going to have 3% of us who are psychopaths because we're a group of humans. And so every group is going to have crazy people in it. Like it's actually really funny. If you go on Google and you type in like something totally obscure, like true crime Barbie, it will come up with like 3 of the top stories that involved the influence of Barbies growing up. Or you can do like true crime Montana or true, like, what were some of the other ones? So funny. You can literally make a connection between anything because true crime is a super exciting pull that people want to watch. It's just entertainment. And so you can make a story out of anything. And I think this is a classic case of that.
Precisely. And, I'm here for the people. I'm here for the converts. I'm here for the investigators. So, ladies, let's just be very transparent to our wonderful audience. Is there anything in our doctrine that teaches us that kidnapping is good, that it's cool to torture people, that we take in crazies off the street when we know that they are crazy and hook them up with our daughters? Like, come on. Seriously. We don't teach that.
Nope.
Leave us alone. Seriously.
It's one of those things that's so obvious that it's actually hard to debunk. It's like, why is water wet?
Seriously.
Why is the sky blue? Like, why are, like, trying to debunk that Mormons are violent criminals is like, I don't even know where to begin. It's so obviously false.
There's the belief in the gift of discernment that you're going to be able to feel whether someone is good or not. Lois felt good about this guy. She gave him $5 and she ended up saying, hey, my husband has some work around the house that if you're handy, we could give you a job as well. And so, Jesus said to give to the poor. This seemed like a very logical thing to do. It was just her being a good woman. And so she ended up giving this man, that $5. And not too long after, he came out to their house and he worked on the roof with Ed Smart, who is Elizabeth Smart's mother. Now, Lois.
Well, Ed is actually her father, but we'll go past that.
I'm going to say, whoa.
I actually think she corrects herself. I just can't believe that she, like Brittany was saying, like, blames your intuition on Mormonism.
Yeah.
I just thought that was, again, a huge stretch. So, as we all know, Elizabeth was kidnapped by this guy. Oh, his name is Brian David Mitchell. And then he renamed himself Emmanuel. And he takes, he takes Elizabeth up into the mountains where his wife, Wanda, is. She renamed herself Hephzibah. And the host of the show makes this big deal about the fact that they dress Elizabeth in white Because guess what, guys? Mormons, when we get married, what color do we wear?
Oh my God.
We wear white.
White. Oh, that's
I
so
know.
unique to us.
I know.
I can't.
I know. Nobody ever gets married in white. So that was like her big aha moment.
Are you sure it wasn't like ivory white or was it like classic white?
Sure.
In Mormonism, sex is second only to murder as far as sins go. And so, here's kidnapping, and sex is even worse than kidnapping,
Wait,
according
what?
to the theology. Okay? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So that amount of shame brought silence, gave her distance, it emotionally
No.
feeling like
Stop
she
it.
would ever
Stop.
be.
Stop. Listen. It was Elizabeth Smart's faith in Jesus Christ and the influence of the church that taught her, even in those moments, like in her interviews, she talks about how they're like, oh, and so you believed him, right? And she's like, no, even then I knew that he was not called of God. I knew that he was wrong because of how I'd been taught. She knew who she was. She knew she was a child of God. And so regardless of some of the constructive criticism that she's given for how to teach chastity and how to teach purity and that kinds of thing, which I think have been super helpful for church culture in teaching girls, she never, ever blamed the church for her feeling the way she did. In fact, it's so interesting. We did an episode recently about the temple as a woman. And I was thinking about, how if you defile a temple by, like, if there's someone who's awful, who shouldn't be in the temple, who goes into the temple itself, we might say he defiled the temple, but the temple itself would not actually have been made unclean by somebody who chose to go in there when they shouldn't have. It is actually that person who's unclean. And by their presence being removed, the temple's fine. The temple is not impure because somebody went in who shouldn't have. In the same way, a woman is not impure because she was violated. And I think Elizabeth Smart knows that and knew that to this day and still remains a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually like the next point that I was going to bring up is that in so many of her interviews, she kept saying how she was like, if they are trying to manipulate me, I'm going to manipulate them. And she did. When it came towards, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but towards the end of her captivity, she told Brian that she felt that he was the real prophet and that we need to go back to Utah because he had taken her to California. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, you believe me that I'm the prophet. And she manipulated them back. But like you said, she never blamed the church and she used it to help her get through this. So she did the opposite in my mind. Okay, so the next issue that the host brings up is that Brian David Mitchell wanted to marry Elizabeth Smart because she was 14 at the time. And she brings up polygamy, which the mainstream Mormon Church doesn't even practice anymore. That was a long time ago. And that he wanted a child bride. So it's also important to bring up the fact that back in the 1800s, at least for me, it's important that like this was very normal. Like Edgar Allan Poe, nobody ever talks about that. Do you guys know his age and his wife's age?
No.
Educate us.
Okay, so she was 13 and he was 26 and they were first cousins.
Well, come on.
And nobody talks about that. So it's very, like someone else, like Tikla was saying, it's very like sensationalized that because it's Mormons.
Now, so are we saying that,
it doesn't make it right.
So the guy that he was trying to imitate what he believes that the church was doing when it was founded? Is that what he's saying?
That's what the host is getting at, is that he's imitating Mormon culture in history.
Because he's not.
Because he's not.
For one, like, I think he might be imitating the critics' representation of the church's history. Because if you look at Joseph Smith, even in the craziest true stories of that time, consent was like number one. Utah was number one in lenient divorce laws for women. It was number one in rights for women. It's like the reason we have the right to vote. And so if he was trying to imitate the early church, he did it completely backwards.
Say it louder for the people in the back, Tikla. Say that again.
That makes me sick that someone would defile the name of Joseph Smith by equating him to forced kidnapped child brides. That's disgustingly wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to like that 3%. I'm still kind of on that. Like 3% of the population is a psychopath. I kind of view it as like 3% is literally possessed by demons and they're walking this earth. And I feel like that kidnapper, what's his name again?
Brian David Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He for sure is possessed by a demon. And he for sure wanted to take Elizabeth Smart, not to have a child bride, but to have sex. And because he's demonic and because he's probably a pedo. And can I say all these words on here? I don't even know. But to equate that to, oh, that's what Joseph Smith did is really gross. Like what you were saying. Joseph Smith took plural wives, but there's actually no evidence, I think, Carden, that he like had sex with all these women, right? We don't know that for sure. He might have just wanted to be sealed to them because he really wanted a heavenly family. He was trying to pull people in so that they could all be together. And it wasn't some sexual fantasy that he was trying to play out like Brian Mitchell Park. Is that his name?
Brian David Mitchell.
Brian David Mitchell.
He doesn't really deserve a real name, though.
Yeah, like whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and to Brittany's point, I think one of the most interesting things is I've watched a few cult documentaries of these awful men who do take multiple brides under awful circumstances. And then I've studied church history, and there is maybe nothing that has strengthened my testimony of Joseph Smith more than watching these documentaries of like Waco or the Davidites or whatever they're called, or some of these other cult leaders, because of the contrast between how Joseph Smith behaved and how these men behaved. And Joseph Smith took every effort to protect those who were following him. And these men do not. And the contrast could not be more stark. And so honestly, if this stuff bothers you, I would say go learn more, because it has only strengthened my testimony to when I actually get into what really happened.
Yeah. So eventually Elizabeth is found and she's reunited with her family. And Wanda and Brian David Mitchell are captured by the police. And then, Card, go ahead and play the next clip, because the host has to admit to something and she kind of skims over it.
She actually did have, some mental illness, but there's still the religious factor here. So
do you like how she just very like, oh, yeah, like she had some mental illness, but like, oh, they're religious, so there's that.
Well, hold on. Play that back for just a second, Carden. Just that little snippet.
Some mental illness, but for him to do so. And so Wanda, she actually did have, some mental illness, but there's still the religious factor here.
Her body language just doesn't seem very confident to me, right? Like she's kind of looking off like, yeah, there's mental illness, but also, there is religion. And, she's just, like you were saying, she kind of skims over that of hoping that we don't catch up on that.
She also talks about alcohol being a huge factor, that they were drinking tons of alcohol and that they were forcing Elizabeth to drink tons of alcohol. And I've never been drunk, but I have a pretty good feeling that people don't make the best decisions while they're under the influence.
I'll take one for the team.
Yeah, Megan.
Okay, Carden is chuckling off to the side. I don't know if I'm allowed to like break the fourth wall or whatever it's called. Nevertheless, I have engaged in adult beverages, and I'm here to tell you that you don't think straight. You really don't. And especially if you are a child consuming that. I didn't. But I can't even imagine a child's brain as they're spiraling out of control, and adults with mental illness. That's the problem. Not the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Not Joseph Smith. That's the problem. These horrible forces that are in this environment, the alcohol, the mental illness, the potential pedophilia. Not even potential. It is what it is. This girl needs to sit down.
And I think what bugs me the most about this host is she can't blame the kidnapper.
Precisely.
She's blaming it on the religion. She's blaming it on the mom. She's blaming it on the gift of discernment. She's blaming it on everything except for the actual person that did this heinous crime.
Excellent point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think to Erica's point earlier, it is really maddening when people equate the history of the church with present day instances, because it's so presentist, right? It's saying, oh, these weird things they did in the history of the church. And it's like, have you guys ever read real history? Or the only history you've ever read, the history of the church? Because it's showing. If you think that this was just a church thing, this was a cultural thing. And I think that's what Erica was getting at earlier.
Yeah. It seems like she didn't want to have to say it, but she had to say it. And it goes back to Tikla's 3%. There's going to be crazies in every group you go to. Doesn't matter what side you're on. There's always going to be the crazies.
Erica, is this the purpose of this girl's entire channel?
So I've watched 2 of her videos. I think she has 6.
Okay.
She has a lot of content on the Daybells, Lori and Chad.
They were in Idaho, right? That Idaho couple?
I think so. I just didn't have the time to watch all of it. But from the 2 videos that I watched, yeah, this is like her purpose is, hey, I'm an ex-mo and look at how all these people are just so messed up. But after I watched this, like I said, I watched her video about the Keys guy, and his parents left the church like the year he was born. So and then they left and they joined a cult in Washington, and then they went and joined another cult. So like there's like not even a link there really. And then with this one, she talks about how the Smarts are LDS, but I don't think she ever brought up if Brian David Mitchell grew up in the church. I know that he pretended to be an investigator at one point so that he was invited into somebody's home for dinner. But as far as the rest of it goes, I'm kind of confused because her story just seems like it's like all over the place about like, how are Mormons to blame? You're horrible people.
Yeah.
Well, and to give the devil its due, I think there have been a lot of sensationalized stories that have come out of Utah. We've got the Daybells, we've got Lori Vallow and Jody Hildebrandt, we've got the Elizabeth Smart case that got so much attention. And so I think you could watch the news and think, what is going on with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Like, this is really odd. But I think what maybe isn't so clear from an outsider's perspective is the reason that these stories are so shocking is because of the contrast, right? You've got these safe neighborhoods, you've got these pristine, like wonderful, loving communities. And then something like this happens where in other contexts, it wouldn't even be news. Like I have lived in high crime areas where stuff like this happens and nobody even bats an eye because it's expected. It's expected that women and children will be abused every day. I think Elizabeth Smart even says like every second, like 68 women are sexually assaulted or something like that.
That's horrible.
So this is this huge problem. And yet when it comes in a place where we're expecting things to be safe, then it's shocking and newsworthy. And Elizabeth Smart even talks about this. She's like, this isn't fair that I've received all this attention just because I was in a family that had means or in a community that was connected, when so many abuse victims don't get any attention for it. And so it's the contrast that makes these stories so newsworthy. And that's actually a good reflection on the church, not the opposite.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Cardin, there's one more clip at 38:53.
Supposedly up until she was released from prison. In February 2020, Elizabeth was sexually assaulted again on a Delta flight. And she said, I don't blame Delta for what he did. And I would imagine that she feels the same way about the Mormon Church. There's that indication that she doesn't blame the church at all for what he did. She just thinks that crazy people are going to do what crazy people are going to do. Beyond
shocking,
not making sure that she didn't know that, she wasn't chewed gum. There, as far as what Elizabeth has said, there isn't necessarily Mormon ties. Obviously, my analysis is a bit different.
Because she's an expert on the situation.
She even said, Elizabeth said that crazy people are going to do what crazy people do.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Demon's going to demonize.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything else to add? Any final thoughts?
A few episodes I was explaining something that was weighing heavy on my mind. Why are we spending all this time debunking these videos when we are all intelligent women with our own experiences and thoughts? Why are we taking somebody else's content? Here's why. Because these things are horrifically untrue. They're untrue. They're a stretch. They are using our religion for entertainment purposes. And I'm just really thankful that we've created this family on Ward Radio where we are able to gather and intelligently articulate what is wrong with this type of content. So again, Erica, thank you for bringing this to my attention.
There are some dark places of the sides of the internet, Megan. I'm glad I could shed some light on it for you.
Yeah, well, and if the best way to debunk things really is just to go to a church, a Latter-day Saint church, because that'll debunk a lot of things right off the bat. But if you're only learning about the church online, if you're feeling radio silence on some of these topics, it really is because it's so obvious to us that this is just garbage that most members just leave it alone. So we're here to say, okay, by the way, that's garbage. Also, come hang out with us because it's a great time. And I think it is hard to debunk things like sexual violence and all that because the data is really messy. Does religion cause violence? All this. You're going to hear all these conflicting studies. But a few stats that I think are really telling as far as the church is concerned. One is that on university campuses, I think it's like 19 to 25% of women report some kind of unwanted sexual content while they're in university. Whereas at BYU, it's only 7%. And half of those were reported as from non-BYU people. And so if you wanted to send your daughter to a safe university, BYU is the place to go. Also, like in scout troops, and Jennifer Roach has done a ton of research on this and it's so helpful, but like they had a whole database of all of the sex offenders to ever be in the Boy Scouts ever. And the church represented, I think they were like 74%, had 74% less abuse than any other group. And so these are just two small examples, but I think they illustrate a broader point that if you want good men to become better and bad men to become good, the church is the place. The church is the place. It's wonderful.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We hope you liked it, so please share with your friends and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you want to support us, please consider purchasing a copy of The Key to the Keystone, Jonah Barnes' latest book. It's available to Ward Radio listeners only for the first 2 weeks of pre-sale via the links in the description below, okay? You can always go to plainandpreciouspublishing.com and get your own copy of the book, or you can actually go to the kind of launch event that we're cooking up here. All the guys from Stick of Joseph, Quick Media, Jacob Hansen, many of us here at Ward Radio, we're actually going to have a launch event for this book in Utah that you can buy tickets for as well. And your ticket's going to be the book, so you get a book as your ticket coming in. It's actually going to be a lot of fun. So if you want to support the channel and you can't help us out with Zelle or with Venmo or with the Cash App, please consider purchasing your own copy of The Key to the Keystone by Jonah Barnes so you can be up on all the latest super cool associate professor of all things apocryphal happenings. Remember, the first 2 weeks only, Ward Radio listeners get a unique link and unique access to the purchase of the pre-sale of this book. So make sure you check it out in the links in the description below. And as always, for this and more, please check us out at wardradio.com.